Hi, welcome to the CTO to CTO chat with Morpheus Data and Metsi Technologies. I'm Adam Hicks, the Field Chief Technologist for Morpheus Data.
I'm Philip Odom, Chief Technology Officer for the US for Metsi Technologies. It's nice to have a conversation, again, just discussing trends and, what you guys are seeing and seeing if those correlate to what we're seeing in the marketplace. We're seeing a lot of customers right now that are really focusing, historically where they've been spending, I guess, time the last couple of years on hybrid multi-cloud, there's now this focus of going back to private cloud. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, it's I see a lot of enterprises who have made a shift towards the public cloud in order to achieve velocity and their application development efforts, and then they get stung with the costs and some of the challenges as well. It is a big overhaul in how you conduct your practice to go into a modern cloud operating model. And I don't know that in the end, they view it as fitting all of their workload needs. And so, yes, I see a lot of organizations coming back to the data center and trying to embrace more of what they're calling, in some cases, a cloud smart model.
So elaborate on that. I'm not really familiar with that term of the cloud smart model. What's that? What does that mean to you guys?
Yeah, so Cloud Smart, as I've sort of come to understand it and working with these customers, is an approach to using cloud where it makes sense to use cloud. And there are services that that the hyperscalers provide that are unmatched by anything that you can do on premises. And I don't just mean from a technology standpoint, but an economic standpoint as well. The ability to go do massive AI ML workloads in GCP, for example. Some of the cloud native architectures that you can achieve in AWS. These are very challenging things to do on-prem. And so where it makes sense, having a true hybrid approach where you're consuming those services, where it makes sense to consume those services, but then being cost effective when you're putting things in that are just traditional IaaS, for example. Bringing those back to the data center where you already have expertise. You can look at it through a CapEx lens instead of an OpEx lens. So it really is kind of a hybrid story, right? It's using the best of breed for the purpose, but also allowing it to make the most economic sense and efficiency sense.
Excellent. Like I mentioned, IaaS, we're seeing, of course, lots of infrastructure as a service, but lots and lots of infrastructure as code. And, it seems like Morpheus now is a great way to manage IAC. And especially too, we're seeing lots of customers that have an interest in Terraform and sort of a combination thereof, right? And so, Morpheus, right now, at least when we make recommendations to customers, that's really our product of choice for that.
Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah. We've spent a lot of time thinking through what we could do to make it meaningful to work with IAC. I think, the industry right now is going through a time of flux where they're trying to embrace how do you do IAC with self-service, but also as it relates back to, traditional enterprise change management. So what we're seeing is this arise of GitOps. And so we've sort of taken two approaches. One is use your IAC to define things in the target infrastructure that you want to be deploying to. You can wrap Morpheus orchestration around that, which is great, makes us extremely extensible, but also our Terraform provider that we've been spending a lot of time on that you can now use to manage your Morpheus. With our hooks, our deep hooks into the private data center, and we're talking back about this cloud smart model, it actually allows people to get to GitOps and on-premises orchestration extremely rapidly and have that same velocity that you might have in cloud, but in the private data center.
A lot of customers too we run into are looking at different ways of managing Kubernetes clusters, and it seems like K8 management. This is something that I guess you guys just did a new release last week, right?
Yeah, it was very, very recently, our 5.3.1 release. And so we've had Kubernetes cluster building for a while. We do have a cloud native computing foundation compliant architecture that we can allow people to deploy. but you can also connect Morpheus to your existing clusters. And this is where we are seeing what you just said, right? The challenge of managing it. And a lot of enterprises that we work with actually have lots of different breeds. Maybe they have OpenShift Rancher, Tanzu, and some vanilla open source Kubernetes too. And they have a collective challenge of, how do we operationalize our efforts in supporting all of these disparate clusters? So we've really focused this last release on a management tool set to make it easier for those ops teams to engage with those clusters, manage them in sort of a standardized format. It's very exciting for us. I think that, this is apropos. We are having this conversation about private cloud, and private cloud seems to be moving very much in that direction. Now, question back for you too. I know you guys we're selling a product. Obviously, we have a vested interest in what we do, but I have been hearing a lot of my customers ask questions about Kubernetes. You guys, though, are tip of the spear in doing for the customers. Do you feel like you are being engaged more and more to help with bringing Kubernetes clusters up, turning them on, best practices around them? What have you seen as it relates to that?
Well, a lot of ours are, customers are really looking for multiple integrations. And it generally will start out on some type of, compute stack from a particular vendor. And then we'll start out, on top of that compute stack with, again, some type of cloud management platform, which, as I'm hearing from Gartner, that term is going away. So that's something I'll maybe discussion here a little bit further down the road. But, a lot of our customers are building out, really more platform as a service. And so they're looking for some other type of, cloud management plane that really sort of allows them to tie everything together, whether that's, Kubernetes management or Terraform instances or infrastructure as code. That's a trend. I mean, almost every customer that we work with right now is really trying to solve that same reformation of their stack, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that there's an interesting turn of events that's happening in Kubernetes land right now too. We kind of talked about COTS workloads, right? Commercial off-the-shelf software, and can that be stuffed in a Kubernetes cluster as well? And I think that I'm starting to see the answer is yes in some cases, although just because it can doesn't mean it should. And so one of the interesting things that I've seen arise out of other vendors, and we're keeping a pretty keen eye on it, I think is sort of a natural place for us in orchestrating across heterogeneous compute endpoints, is mixed modalities of using containers for certain workloads, but how can you orchestrate VMs behind the same platform? Whether it's Kubernetes doing the lifting or it's something else, but having it in one meaningful place.
Well, we're also seeing sort of about a 70-30 mix of customers that are that are using VMware as opposed to OpenShift. It seems like the majority of customers we're working with are using VMware in some form or fashion. Conversely, we see lots of customers that they may not necessarily be using OpenShift, but they're using tons of Ansible.
Yeah, speaking of Ansible, the rise of Ansible as an orchestration technology I've found really interesting, coming from how it started as a config management solution. And now as sort of a declarative wrapper, really just for procedural code, and gives it some extensibility, meaning you can do just about anything you want with it as a piece of technology, if you're willing to write the module and or the playbooks itself. And I do see a lot of people taking that to a place that something like, Terraform might seem a little bit more limiting, at least operationally, especially from an on-prem context. So we've definitely taken an attitude of let's integrate with that. Let's use the right tool in the right place for the right job. And a lot of our customers, I think, have been able to increase their velocity a lot with us, get significant time to value in trying to achieve that true on-prem orchestration.
In APM itself, even though that term's sort of going away and it's really still more full stack observability. But that is one of the gaps in traditional APM is the orchestration layer. And so, yeah, I tend to agree with you there. And I think this is, Morpheus is definitely a product that helps to, eliminate that blind spot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't want to come along and say, hey, we can give you monitoring on a saturated network switch in any way, shape, or form, like tools that they already have. That's not where we sit. But
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we look at what we're thinking of the platform as a service. Again, that would be something with some type of network service orchestrator sitting on some type of software-defined network fabric, again with some type of high-end compute, and then Morpheus in that CMP layer, and then some other type of again full stack visibility product that could be AppDynamics, could be Dynatrace, some other type of workload optimization product, and then. Again, a lot of customers, once you start building out solutions like that, then they want some type of custom dashboarding to go with it to sort of, streamline, event management and things like that. But definitely that's a trend that we're seeing.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of workload optimization, that was the other hot area of interest was, because now with IBM taking away Turbonomics, means that there's a hole in the story that they've classically told, right? And so they looked and said, hey, what sort of data and recommendations does Morpheus have? And so our guidance section, where we're making proactive right-sizing recommendations for your IaaS, is sort of a powerful allegiance.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah. Now, of course, right now the market is very interested in how do you do sort of workload optimization in the public cloud. And I think it's kind of an interesting question because, a lot of the compute services that people are doing in these cloud native architectures are sort of on demand anyway. So there isn't necessarily an optimization story per se, but there is an optimization story either brokering between clouds or an optimization story for correct architectures. Does it need to be built like it's built? And it's kind of funny to me because people keep seeking a tool, but I really think that is where consultants like you guys can really shine and come along and say, hey, you probably didn't need, a cache layer and a database. This database already has it built in, or, bring your expertise and help with those architectures. And that's going to be where they get the biggest lift.
So, let's talk about ITSM. So building out, service offerings. Of course, lots and lots of customers use ServiceNow. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about, what are your thoughts around, that, service orchestration layer with ServiceNow? How does that work with your product? Where do you delineate who's actually doing what particular orchestration?
Yeah. Well, I come from the customer side originally. I think a lot of us, either in partners or in vendors have spent their time on the customer side. And the thing I'll say is that, when I was on the customer side, I was always looking for kind of an optimization program on how am I going to get the job done the least amount of time, but also have the most extensibility and supportability long-term. Like, if I spend a lot of time coding it myself, I'm just accruing technical debt, which is great for job security, but not for the longevity of what the company is trying to do. And so I think that it's kind of interesting when we get into a lot of ServiceNow shops, and because it's a big product, it does a lot. And big shops will have, dedicated ServiceNow teams and developers. And of course, they're going to say, hey, we can do this. We can do everything this product does. At that point, it's that same optimization question, though. Okay, how long and how supportable? How many lines of code are you going to have to write? And so when we end up working with those organizations and sort of showing them what we can do almost turnkey through our native integrations, our native orchestration, And, we're bootstrapping. It's that same time to value thing I mentioned before, right? We're sort of bootstrapping their ability to provision workloads into their data center in a matter of days or handful of weeks. Typically that ServiceNow team says, okay, then we're going to let that infrastructure orchestration happen in Morpheus. Then it becomes, but we're still doing the business process management, right? We're doing that side of logic. We're still the place where you're doing change recording, and we honor that. So we have a rich set of integrations, whether we are making sure that the entries into the CMDB are properly recorded. We're following approval workflows. We can integrate with those and pull those in as a matter of policy. Or even just pushing our catalog. So if you are using Morpheus to build a rich catalog of services, kind of getting to your original question, we make it very easy to do that, but we also make it extremely easy through a plugin and the ServiceNow marketplace to just show them in ServiceNow with minimal configuration and no coding at all. And so it becomes a very powerful together story.
One of the things we like the most about the product are the plugins, because they are very simple. Are there any new plugins, I guess, with the new release that we should know about?
So the biggest one is that we did. Now, I wouldn't call this a plugin. We are moving more towards a true plugin architecture. By the way, I'll digress for a second on that, because what we want to do is we want to take the native integrations that we've spent so much time on. And start sort of open sourcing at least that code base as it plugs into our object model, and sort of democratizing the effort, allowing partners like yourself, even our field teams or savvy customers to author their own and create extensibility into vendors that we don't yet have a named integration to. So that is probably our biggest move in general, is more towards that architecture. But just from a sheer effort, like I would say 5.3.1 was, we talked about Kubernetes, but the biggest was what we call Terraform instance types. We always had the ability to work with Terraform, but now being able to refer to them in our parlance as an instance type allows you to wrap them into some of our native workflows, like what we were just talking about with ServiceNow, for approvership, and use our policy engine on top of it as well. So yeah, no new named ones, but the extensibility of bringing anyone that you might want.
Yeah, that's even better. Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
that's fantastic. What is it? Why do you guys like the sort of that whole VMware VCF stack as much as you guys do? I mean, you guys, I say that like it. I mean, you guys, support it. But is there something, behind the scenes that technically that you guys like? Is it just that's just what customers want? I mean, obviously, if customers didn't want it, you guys wouldn't do it. But
yeah, by and large,
what's made you guys
invest in it and become so successful with it? Yeah, I would say it really just is market presence and market demand. Like you nailed it. You've probably heard our origin story, where you said the word platform, which I really appreciated. And especially, in one of the other statements that you made about, CMP sort of as a Gartner designation might be getting retired. We were really originally built as a platform, and, we competed with the early original OpenShift and Mesosphere DCOS, and really the backend primitive that we were built around was the container. And so we could do things like tie into Cisco UCS and go bootstrap servers as Docker hosts, and then orchestrate container workloads on them. It was a novel idea, but when we went to market, what we found was that as a sole model was a little bit too futuristic for a lot of enterprise operations teams. They liked the idea, and they said, can we do this instead of on containers on bare metal? Could we do this on VMs and VMware? And this was early days for us. And of course, we wanted the business, we wanted the opportunity to prove ourselves. So we said yes, and we built it in. lo and behold, that's what the enterprise has wanted ever since. You know, more than any other integration or any other capability, that has been the one that has created the most demand. And it's not just VCF; it really is vCenter as the nexus and, you know, the heart of what we talk to. There's a lot of capabilities in VCF and the software-defined data center that they bring. One of the ones that has, you know, obviously come up on the back of that, because when we're owned by ops, we're frequently owned by the little subset of ops called the virtualization team. That tends to be where I think that, you know, Morpheus aligns. And the virtualization team has spent a lot of time, you know, thinking through how do they get more, and you'll appreciate this with your background in Cisco consulting, more intentional about networking. And so NSX. And so that has then become a deep integration of ours, as well as extensibility into network orchestration through VMware's network product. So yeah, so it really, like I said, it just has been market demand, and it's been a huge boon to us, because I think that, you know, VMware is really the heart of that private cloud ideology of the on-premises data center. So, well, one thing I could kind of tack on to that conversation would be that, and I don't know, this is up to whether we include it or not, but the thing I'd like to tack onto that too is that, you know, vCloud Foundations, there's a lot of tooling that's sort of built into the enterprise suite that I think that we kind of help with a lot of organizations who are looking to offset that and create a more agnostic model. One of the things that I think that a lot of customers have sought us out for is to get a little bit more vendor control, if you will. And I know that can be a bit of a hairy term, but, you know, it's the idea that they can easily swap out which IPAM they're using, which DNS they're using, which hypervisor, lo and behold, that they're using, you know, which load balancer, any of the things that we integrate with, that we have an object model for. We sort of let them hold the vendors accountable for, you know, helping make them successful. And we make it very easy for them to, you know, turn it off and bring another one in. That, I think, is a very powerful alliance for somebody who is data center oriented. And they are, just as anybody is in the public cloud, they're trying to manage costs as well on premises. And so that's been a big benefit for us too, as a sort of a critical capability.
Well, and that's just, you know, it's funny you say that, because that's really an underrated benefit of being very vendor agnostic. Is you know, the other side of the coin really truly is vendor control. And so that's really, really, you know, helpful with certainly with the product.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that you can migrate workloads anywhere at any time, I'm actually sure that it makes some of the, you know, the big, you know, compute vendors, as well as even some of the hyperscalers, a little bit wary and leery, because, you know, their goal is lock-in. And so we kind of put ourselves in there as the, you know, the white knight, you know, and it definitely doesn't make our job easy having to keep up with it all the time. But, you know, it allows us to really shine the light towards, you know, a better way of operating for a lot of our customers.
So a lot of our customers, you know, are, you know, large DevOps shops. And a lot of the work we do is not necessarily for the customer, you know, DevOps 101, but it's really more DevOps governance and enablement. And so, you know, the goal that we have within that governance and enablement model for DevOps is really to lead the customer to some level of implicit approval. And so obviously there are a host of products that we use to enable that. But we've also found that, again, just Morpheus, the way that we can integrate that into CI/CD and then into our release management with GitLab, seems to work seamlessly.
Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah, I appreciate your attitude towards implicit approval, and that's really what our governance model is built around is you can create role-based access structures so users can create self-service requests and have them automatically fulfilled, but they can only place them, in specified or designated areas. And then of course, have that governance over and above that says you can only make it so big, have it for so long before it gets shut down. And, as long as the request fits within those confines, everything's groovy. That's very much been our approach. And the great part about that is that fits right into that velocity increase that, DevOps as a practice, purports to bring. So self-service, I think and if you go and you look back at, documents from, DevOps talks in the past, Gene Kim has brought up the idea of self-service as a fundamental DevOps pillar. So I hold that one near and dear to my heart.
Well, it's funny too, with our government customers, all DevOps is really DevSecOps. And again, Morpheus seems to be very, very pliable and certainly helps us maintain compliance with the DevSecOps model as well.
Well, yeah, I think governance is sort of the first layer in security. So, while we do have some tooling to help you enable security elements, you need agents installed, you need scans run. We have some of those tools, but really as a governance overlay, that's that first layer of making sure that you're secure. How do you prevent, production data from being exposed to the world? How do you prevent a developer from putting a workload on a production cluster that's going to take it down or overrun it while they run tests? So yeah, we fit nicely into that story when people are looking at governance as a fundamental layer of security.
Yeah, I would definitely agree there.
Yeah.
All right.